Welcome, nutritionradio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowery, University Nutrition Professor of over 20 years and podcast host of long-running shows like Iron Radio. Come on in. Fitness Fridays. Hey everybody, happy Friday. We're going to talk about some fitness as we are wont to do today. First though, I want to just touch on a few of the very first reviews that we've gotten on iTunes. Hooray. This first one by Triumph Athletics. He says, Dr. Lowery gives terrific nutritional information that is digestible for the average listener. Thank you, Triumph Athletics. He or she, I should say. Another one, this podcast presents information in highly digestible chunks, pun intended. Dr. Lowery has a PhD and is an adjunct college professor. He presents information that on the surface could be somewhat complicated in a fashion that's easy to understand, no doubt, from his experience in the classroom. Dr. Lowery was one of the co-hosts of an exceptionally long-running podcast called Iron Radio, still available. He occasionally returns for more of a long-form podcast when his schedule allows. The information that he presented on Iron Radio for so many years was instrumental in furthering my knowledge of exercise physiology and nutrition. The best part of both podcasts is that you are receiving information that has no bias. It is firmly based on the available literature and is presented in a way that is easily understood. Dr. Lowery has made me more of an intelligent lifter, and if you listen to this podcast, I believe you will become one also. Dr. Lowery, thank you for finding the time to make all of us smarter. That is by Ed Tech. I know who you are. Thank you. Thank you so much. And then one more. I'm thrilled to see Dr. Lowery rejoin the podcast community with his new show focusing on nutrition. As a longtime listener of Iron Radio from the beginning, I can attest to the depth of his knowledge and expertise. There are not many individuals who have both the academic knowledge and practical experience that Dr. Lonnie has in the areas of fitness, health, and nutrition. We missed you, Doc. Please continue to share your pearls of wisdom with us all, sir. That's from Jay Gullery, 31, with the title of that post or that review was PhD Expertise. Thank you 50 times. It's nice to get a couple of reviews going here. It's the kind of thing that can keep us chugging away. But let's get to the content. I don't like podcasts that go on and on and on with reviews, especially the ones that kind of buy and bribe the 5-star reviews. I never really understood that. I mean, if I suck, I guess you got to tell me. But in any case, let's talk about the content here. What I want to touch on today, there's a new paper that just came out about lean mass loss, fat-free mass, right? That's more than just muscle tissue. It's bone and water and whatnot. But let's face it, it's mostly muscle mass. And how losing muscle occurs when you diet, and then what that means for rebound. This is a brand new paper here by Martins and colleagues. Let's check this out here. The journal is Obesity and Eating Disorders. It's May of 2023. It is spanking new stuff. Here's the title: Association between fat-free mass loss, changes in appetite, and weight regain in individuals with obesity. So it starts by saying that the role of fat-free mass loss in modulating weight regain in individuals with obesity, as well as some of the other things that are involved, mechanisms involved, remain inconsistent. So they're going to try to clarify this for us a bit. They took subjects with a body mass index of 36, so far above the criteria of 30, right? This is just weight for height. Far above the criteria of 30 to qualify as obese. 44 plus or minus 9 years old. 29 males in this group out of the 70 individuals. They underwent 8 weeks of a very low calorie intake, only about 600 kcal per day. Yikes. Per day. Followed by 4 weeks of gradual refeeding and weight stabilization and a 9-month maintenance program on sort of this caloric, right, even calorie diet according to needs. They looked at body weight, body composition, plasma concentrations of beta-hydroxybutyrate, right, a marker of ketosis for those of you who are familiar, and then some fasting and appetite-related hormones like ghrelin, the hunger hormone, if you will, GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide 1. We've talked about that here on the show before in recent weeks. GLP-1, all those meds that are so popular right now for diabetic persons and blood sugar control, also causing large amounts of weight loss. You can go back and check out the relevant episode in recent weeks here. Peptide YY, other types of hormones, CCK. There's a whole bunch of hormones that affect hunger either in a positive or a negative way. All right, the GLP-1 would be more of something that would reduce hunger. And they added something that I always think is helpful, a subjective measurement to go with these objective blood work measurements, and that's just appetite feelings. just a rating of appetite during fasting, and every 30 minutes after a fixed breakfast for 2.5 hours. So they had measures at baseline, week 9, and 1 year, or I believe week 13 in 35 of the subjects. And then they just looked at the associations, right, between the fat-free mass loss and then the weight regain and the appetite and the hormones. So what did they find? Weight loss at week 9 was 17.5 kilos. So they lost a lot of weight on this tragically low-calorie intake. What's that, 38.5 pounds in 9 weeks? Weight regain at 1 year was 1.7 plus or minus 8.2 kilograms. So a huge variation in what was regained. After adjusting for weight loss and fat mass at baseline, so how fat they were at the beginning, the percent fat-free mass loss at week 9 was not a significant predictor of weight regain. So you might think that, if they lose tons of fat-free mass, maybe that will drive weight regain because they have, slower metabolic rate or less lean tissue to deposit nutrients in or whatever, but that didn't seem to be the case. Similar results were seen at week 13. So again, not predicting the weight regain. The greater the percent fat-free mass loss at week 9, but not at week 13, the smaller the reduction in basal ghrelin concentrations. And they had tried to adjust for other things like the weight loss and the beta-hydroxybutyrate, the ketotic marker. What did they conclude? Percent fat-free mass loss was not a significant predictor of weight regain at 1 year in individuals with obesity. We have to remember population specific, right? These are in the very obese persons here. However, a greater percent fat-free mass loss was accompanied by a greater increase in ghrelin secretion under ketogenic conditions. And they say that suggests a link between the fat-free mass and appetite regulation. You wouldn't really want a lot of ghrelin running wild on you, right, when you're trying to maintain your new lower body mass. Now, I know a lot of you are exercisers, you're resistance trainers, and that sort of thing. Of course, not all of you. The show is not just sports nutrition. But here's a paper from about a year ago, the European Journal of Applied Physiology by Roth and colleagues. Lean mass sparing in resistance-trained athletes during caloric restriction, the role of resistance training volume. So this might put a little perspective on what we just saw in the obese population. It says many sports employ caloric restriction to reduce athletes' body mass. During these phases, resistance training, the volume, is often reduced to accommodate recovery demands. Not 100% sure about that. I'm sure that happens, but I'm not sure every time that we're cutting calories, and we're certainly not going to cut them in athletes to the 500 or 600 calories a day like we saw in that VLCD, that very low-calorie diet with the obese persons. But I'm not sure that always happens, but let's say it does. People cut back on the volume of the resistance exercise while they're dieting. Now, we know that resistance training volume, there's a certain requirement for volume to be an anabolic stimulus. This study, suggests that. They looked at 15 studies that met their criteria. And what did these guys find in their review paper? Studies involving high resistance training volume programs, that is more than 10 sets per muscle group each week, revealed low to no lean mass loss. And that was mostly true in females, which seemed to be a little bit more favored in this higher volume kind of approach. Like good scientists, they do play it safe by saying the evidence is insufficient to conclude that a higher resistance training volume, again, this is during dieting, quote-unquote, calorie restriction, is better suited to spare lean mass during calorie restriction, although data seem to favor higher volumes in female athletes during calorie restriction. Moreover, the data appear to suggest that increasing resistance training volume during this kind of dieting might be more effective in ameliorating that muscle atrophy in both male and female resistance-trained athletes when compared to studies with reduced resistance training volume. So overall, obviously, from these two papers that we looked at today, we can't guarantee that resistance training is going to be the cure-all for preserving muscle tissue when you're dieting very hard, restricting calories. But from what we've seen in elderly people with sarcopenia, microgravity and spaceflight, obviously resistance training of sufficient volume can be helpful in helping to spare muscle tissue. It's certainly something that I would want to do if I was on a lower calorie diet and getting myself into a negative, calorie balance of maybe, 500 to 1,000 calories below my, let's say, 3,000 calorie baseline. I would include the resistance training. Yes, I sure would. I'm not part of that obese population, although my BMI is about 29, but I'm not part of that obese population, so I can't really speak to the fact that my ghrelin would be affected by the muscle loss and that kind of thing. That does kind of make sense that there is this coupling effect, and if you lose a lot of muscle tissue, maybe you are more hungry later. Maybe it's your body trying to correct itself in some way. Anyway, that's going to be enough rambling for today. Please check us out on YouTube. Our backup is Lawnman07, or you can leave a comment on iTunes and I'll read them like I did today, some type of review on iTunes. You can also find us on Stitcher and Amazon and Audible and Spotify. We're all over the place, so please check us out, and we'll see you next time. The NutritionRadio.org podcast is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, check with your physician, nutritionist, or qualified exercise physiologist in order to make the progress that you need.